What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 361. My name is Steven, one of the co-hosts of the show, and as always, I'm joined by
Ron
and Johnny Haircut.
I noticed that, yeah. And you would too notice that if you followed us on the YouTube channel.
See,
I just want to throw that out there as a little carrot for everybody who wants to see John with a haircut. It's up on the YouTube. You can listen to last week's episode and compare it to this week's episode and say, "Whoa, you got some haircut there, John." A lot of it.
Oh, hell yeah.
A lot was on the floor at Tin Pot.
You're looking good, though, friend. You're looking good.
You know, it's one of those times where they took more off than I thought, and I've grown to like it as the days have gone by since I got the cut. But there's always that first thought where you're they took away my safety, they took away my shield.
No, it looks really good. I'm going to tell you right now.
Thanks. My mom's going to love it. We're visiting home in a couple of weeks, so that was the idea behind it. Is like just
that's great.
Go ahead and get the haircut in advance, so it's that at 3 weeks after the haircut is always when it's.
Oh, what a sweet spot that is.
At least for me it is, the way I get mine.
Yeah, I'm right around that 2-3 week mark, and it's just like the perfect length. It's got the thickness back. Yeah, it's there.
It's just shaggy enough. It's doing its own thing, but it's not crazy yet. Yeah.
It's very considerate of you to get that ready for mom in the visit.
Yes. It is.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, today's episode, we're obviously going to do our required viewing, which my pick last week was 2009's Avatar, just in light of Avatar, The Way of Water coming out the day this podcast comes out. But unfortunately, none of us have seen that, so I chose it as my pick for required viewing, and we'll get into that in a moment. But I think we may have just talked about this last week, may even been off the camera, off recording before we recorded last week's episode, because stuff started coming out about just this massive mashup, mix-up, overhaul, reset, whatever you want to call it. But the whole James Gunn, Peter Safran taking over the DC Films piece, and what their plan was going forward. A lot of stuff started coming out last week in a lot of the trades relating to Wonder Woman and Aquaman and what their plans were. And then this week, even more came out relating to Superman and Henry Cavill specifically, and their plans or no plan to use him anymore as Superman. But yeah, so I figured, we were talking about what to kind of go over at the top of the show and just kind of an overall conversation of the craziness right now around Warner Brothers, DCEU, DCU, what DCEU has left, what, why does that matter if it's all being reset, but I don't know. Where you guys at on this? What are you feeling? What's your read on this?
Ronald? I'm sad, man.
About the Cavill part of it?
I think all of it. I think because I just the change of it just feels weird. I think because it had to happen. I mean, new people coming in, they have to make some changes. Right. And so, seeing that the Superman that I've come to know as Superman is not going to be Superman, and he's skewing a little younger for the story, and that's why he can't cast Henry Cavill. And the statement that Henry Cavill put out,
that old piece of shit, Henry Cavill.
Yeah,
he can't.
So he's up there, man.
So it's super weird, man. A couple news outlets kind of give this impression that Henry Cavill has a reputation in Hollywood as being kind of an asshole. I've heard
Henry Cavill.
Henry Cavill. I've heard it more than once.
Wow, I've read many accounts of the opposite.
No, I've heard he's kind of an asshole, and kind of difficult to deal with. And I don't know if any of that's true. It might not be true, but he's aligning himself with The Rock and The Rock's wife, and it feels strange because it was feeling like that was the direction of it was Black Adam and Superman. That was going to be the next big rivalry.
The only reason we thought that was the direction was because The Rock was out saying that,
Exactly.
And knowing that he and Henry Cavill have the same management and that it's The Rock's wife, to me really changes my feelings about that whole cycle of the story, which was The Rock bringing Henry Cavill in. Now it feels like it's somebody who wanted their 10% or whatever it would be to be, higher or whatever.
So you're saying he's like a mafia don that just, hey buddy, if you don't want your legs broken, you give us your 10%. So you think that's
It's like the mafia. You know how the midway into the mafia movie, there's always the guy who comes in and thinks he's got the drop on the big Don, but actually doesn't. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And it's really weird to see The Rock kind of play himself like that, frankly. But I mean, I think it's that kind of negotiating in the press that happens. And now that it just makes sense to me that it was a concerted effort to bring Henry Cavill back in for various reasons.
Yeah.
There's people out there acting like The Rock is the guy who knows what needs to happen in the DC universe. There's people out there saying they're going to boycott the DCEU. There's people saying that James Gunn should be fired. There's people saying they're not even going to see the Guardians movie that comes out in May because they don't like James Gunn. I think the
get out of here.
The crazy reactions to this, if you look at Twitter, there's a hashtag fire James Gunn. I mean, if you really just want to take a little trip down insanity lane, look at some of these people who act like they've already seen these movies and know what the plan is. I mean, I guess I'm with you, Ronald. I'm sad to see particularly Henry Cavill go, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, if Peter Safran and James Gunn are the guys that a couple of weeks ago I was excited to hear they're coming in, I'm not going to suddenly balk now that they seem to have some sign of a plan. But I agree that the Henry Cavill piece is weird because he just went public saying, he did a whole round of interviews talking about how he's back in the MCU. I mean, back in the DCU. Who knows? Maybe that was a Freudian slip. He might be headed to the MCU. It just feels uncomfortable for him personally.
Yeah. Well, the last thing I was going to say is one thing that we have to understand, even in the space that we're in, is if you're hearing about the news, it's probably happened already and been in development for quite some time, right? So like the idea that he has a slate coming at the beginning of the year is not because he went into the office 2 weeks ago, chuck some papers at them. It's like, hey, I have a fucking crazy idea. We should put this in, I don't think that happened. I think this is maybe closer to a year in the making. And we're hearing the tail end of it. I don't think that we had any idea that this was happening because it happened already.
Well, they say that when they,
I don't agree with that. I don't.
You don't think so?
No way. I don't think this is a year in the making. Only because, like, they literally shot the stuff for Black Adam in like September. With him, like he was never supposed to be a part of that movie. Like I think that was a whole.
Oh no. I think I'm referring to more the James Gunn and Peter Safran part. I meant to talk. That's what I meant.
Like what? Like them coming on board?
Them coming on board in some.
Well,
capacity.
that may be the case.
The other stuff I don't know anything about. I don't know.
Yeah,
I think that was very last minute.
That may have been long in the game, but
it may have been shot on an iPhone.
It just speaks, it just speaks to like how there's just like this complete confusion in what's going on with Warner Discovery and DC. Like there's just all this even if you go back and look at like what's going on with Batgirl, what's going on with Blue Beetle was streaming, now it's theatrical, all the stuff with Ezra Miller and the Flash movie, like Jason Momoa maybe not being Aquaman anymore. It's just there's I'm sure some of those conversations have been had about like what's the path forward, and especially in terms of James Gunn coming on. But they didn't just I agree. I don't think they just hired him. I think that he probably presented some sort of idea of what his plan or their plan would be. But I think it's just like this is just another notch in the belt of like how unorganized and lack of planning DC has, and they've had that all along. Like I feel like all the Zack Snyder stuff, leaving, Justice League being taken over, Justice League coming back out as Zack Snyder. Like there's just so many like cooks in the kitchen, it feels like, in terms of what is happening, because you never get a consistent message in terms of like what the actual plan is. And even like thinking about the whole Cavill being in Black Adam, like there's no intent to ever do that. And that happens because The Rock probably doesn't think that the movie's tracking as well as it should be. And, even with Henry Cavill's appearance and, the buzz it generated and people wanting to see that movie simply to see that stinger, the movie still, depending on who you believe, is going to lose money, and that is a whole separate conversation about like how now, like they're saying The Rock's, like people have leaked those financial sheets to Variety that to try to make it look like Black Adam's making money.
Jesus Christ.
The Rock's hand in all this is like really disgusting to me personally. Like I'm kind of sick of The Rock at this point.
It's very cringe-inducing.
If it's real, I'll say if it's real, it's the worst tampering. It's the if it's true, right? It's the worst tampering I've ever seen in a movie, and implicating other people and things like
and Henry Cavill's career is affected now.
Look, man, this guy quit his job. Even it doesn't matter who he was as a person. He had a job. He quit his job because he was promised the idea of another. And now he's like in a shitty situation because like Witcher's been recasted.
Yeah.
And they're not going to act like Netflix isn't going to scared rabbit on the other side. We're going to fire him and bring it. They're not going to do that. They're not going to jump like that. But also, I mean, there was talk that he might have been breaking from the creative team in terms of the direction of the show. But I do find it doubtful that he would have left in the way that he did if he didn't think he was coming back to do the Superman thing. I was half joking before about Marvel snapping him up for something. A lot of people are saying Captain Britain is a character that I can confirm as a fan of that character in the comics. Just about the only thing that's wrong is the hair color, but I can get over that. He would be great. There is some, Ronald, you talking about him being an asshole. There is some of that. I don't know if you've heard about this. James Gunn has a sort of no asshole policy on his movies. Like if he hears stories about someone being difficult or having some baggage in that way, he doesn't want to work with them. And I'm not saying that's it because they've said they might want to do more with him in the future. It's not even clear if they just mean for this movie that they're doing now, they need a younger actor. They didn't even say he couldn't play an older Superman at some point. But I feel like the fact that they're not announcing more than they have to is a sign that even though it is maybe something that's been in the works, and supposedly James Gunn, when he came over to do Suicide Squad, when Marvel fired him the first time, supposedly they wanted him to do a Superman movie. That's just something I read. So I don't know if he's been toying with this idea. It's possible he's been kicking this version of a Superman movie around for a long time, though. I don't think James Gunn is taking it lightly. I think all the DC fans that are sad because of the Henry Cavill part of it might want to wait and see what James Gunn has in store, because some part of me believes he's going to at least try to hit that spot that people have been saying they want, which is Superman the hero, Superman trying to do the right thing, Superman the golden boy, so to speak. So until we see what's going on with it, I'm not going to pass judgment at all. But I do think that if there is some behind the scenes reason, and Henry Cavill there's some scuttlebutt, there's some kind of grooming scandal. I keep seeing references to some unsavory stuff that I haven't really dug into, so I don't want to speak to it too much. But if there is some kind of he's difficult to work with part of it, that could be a reason why there's a soft firing that's happening over there with James Gunn and Peter Safran, who aren't going to say he's an asshole to the press, but they might distance themselves, from baggage they don't want as they go forward. They're making a 10-year plan. If we just say that's not true, right? Right. That might not be true. Let's just assume it's not true. I'm probably wrong to bring any of that up. I am. Yeah, it's because I've heard some stuff too, but I say that's not true. Let's close that chapter. Right. I think The Rock. I've told you this 100. You could track me years ago. He's an asshole, man. We know the asshole. We know the real asshole in the situation. The Rock. That's the real asshole. I don't know how far it's gone. I don't know. I think he took some of that alpha energy into the boardroom, and I don't know how much that flies in a group full of people who just want you to make good stuff. I think he's really scratching and clawing even still at not letting it be seen as a disappointment, right? As a film, and also just his involvement in a franchise like this, because they can spin it however they want, but there's no mark left by Black Adam as a film or a character. And I'd be shocked if they do a sequel to this movie. You know what I'm saying? Like, I really, really, that's the article that's going to come out, is where James Gunn and Peter Safran are like, we're not doing anything with Black Adam at this time. Because like that's the L for The Rock. That's the loss. And he doesn't take those lightly. He's a pretty poor sport, as we've seen before in media, in social media. But like, that's really the interesting piece for me, because I can't see a place for Black Adam in any of this if it's all being reset. There's no, especially, and what would burn his ass is if even trying to include Cavill in the stinger is what makes them not do it. Not be allowed to do it, because the rest of it is pretty ambiguous in terms of who they're replying to, except for Amanda Waller's presence. But I mean, and Hargrove. But I mean, I think it's just like the whole. I don't know what just keeps hitting me, and we can move on in a bit. Like. I am just completely in awe and just dazed by like how much of a clusterfuck the whole thing is. Like even the Patty Jenkins shit.
like her releasing a statement, James Gunn replying to reporters on Twitter that are posting shit that's inaccurate. Like just the vibe around this whole transition, when you've got to believe the intent of this is to reset this shit. There's no reason to continue going when they've been trying to basically sink their own ship for a few years now. And, you know, they've got 4 movies left that are really kind of still a part of all this, unless they figure out a way to, I don't know, make Blue Beetle or, you know, maybe use the Flash in some way to kind of, you know, basically get rid of it all. But like, I'm just like in awe every day when I see these things trending about this universe that never really took off.
I have a question for you guys related to that. We have 4 movies that are kind of going to serve as a funeral for the remnants of this thing.
Yeah.
Do you think they should release these theatrically? Do you think they should?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, man.
100%. And they would never not because they would never not because of what they did with like Batgirl and, you know, where the money's at right now. You know what I mean? The only
theoretically, James Wan and Jason Momoa doing another Aquaman movie is going to be some kind of a box office home run. I mean, theoretically, that could be a huge movie.
Yeah.
Aquaman made $1 billion.
Yeah. Not because the DCEU was so healthy either, but because people like Jason Momoa and the style of the film felt good.
So
you know, I think the thing that's interesting, and we've kind of tiptoed around this, and I guess we should mention it since I besmirched Henry Cavill's character without much information. Ezra Miller, they are someone who there's been a lot of negative press about, and there's been a lot of call to fire that, reset that role. I've seen people saying, I can't believe they fired Henry Cavill, but they didn't fire Ezra Miller. And I'm thinking, like, do people not realize the difference between a movie that hasn't even been written yet and a movie that's in a can that they've been trying to fix? I'm very curious about where they go. The Flash still, I mean, it's interesting that one hasn't been kiboshed, though. The ones that haven't been kiboshed are the ones that I think, whether it's a funeral or not, Ronald, it's an interesting little pocket of movies, because how do you market something that's like, this is the end of the saga, but there is no real end to the saga because these movies weren't conceived with that in mind? I wonder if they're going to backdoor in something into Flashpoint that feels like, as Steve said, a way to indicate there's a reset happening, so that then if we wake up and it's a new DC universe, and Jason Momoa is still here and Gal Gadot is still, or whatever is going to be going on that we just don't know yet, or if they wipe that board clean. I'm just saying, I think that's the thing that maybe Flashpoint is going to do that we haven't imagined yet, is like give them a creative out that does feel like an ending to something. Because otherwise that movie seems like the craziest, most jeopardized one, because I've heard so many differing things about what's actually in that. Ben Affleck was touted as coming back to play Batman, and supposedly he's in the movie for a few lines or something like that. I don't know. I just think it all reeks of mishandling, kind of what you were saying, Steve. It's crazy. It's like, it's like a Star Wars fans are like, oh man, this saga's a mess, and then DC is a total hold my beer situation there. You know?
Yes, it is a shit show.
I mean, I think it feels like Flash is really the movie, their highest one, which is the irony of it all, because it's probably their biggest problem. Yeah, you know, in terms of the testing for that movie has been like through the roof. And I believe it's probably a good movie, because I've read a lot about what it's about that they know, and you know, I like Andy Muschietti, and it could be a cool movie. But it's just such a weird positioning to be like, you know, you have these 4 movies, and they're not even, I don't think, in the right sequence. I think Flash is coming out before Aquaman. Right. So it's like, even if it does reset, like it's like this standalone, and you whatever, even if it does, you just go to the movies, maybe you'll enjoy these movies. They're just entertainment, you know, like it doesn't need to be a part of it, you know, to enjoy it. But I mean, there's no doubt that there's 100% intent to just completely reboot the whole thing, like start it over and do the groundwork that they didn't do it the first time. Yeah, they jumped the gun real early, and they have been backtracking ever since.
Would you say that they jumped the James gun?
You could say so. Yeah, that would be accurate.
Okay. I'll talk about that later. All right, let's
move on.
Yeah.
To the movie that Steve
to another
said,
James.
Another James. Well, you know, I thought you said this was a James Cameron movie, but when you said Avatar, I went and I looked for the movie Tar, and I found it, and it's directed by Todd Field, and I expected there to be more blue cat people in it, frankly, but
no mocap.
I just remembered it wrong. No, but yeah, Avatar. Maybe explain. I liked your thinking behind why we should rewatch this one, Steve. I mean, it is. There's a new one coming out, but this is a movie that we've probably mentioned over the years, but not really revisited. At least that was what my feeling was. I had really not watched this movie from the beginning to the end in 10 years or something like that. So
yeah, easily. I mean, I don't think I've watched the movie outside of seeing it theatrically the weekend it opened in 2009. I haven't seen it since. And I mean, it kind of has a bit of reputation like that, where, it's like, the biggest movie of all time, gross wise, even, recently after Endgame came out, recapturing that top spot due to the re-release. But it's got this reputation for like being the largest movie or the highest grossing movie of all time to really have, or seemingly have very little like cultural impact, lasting at least cultural impact, where, you see the remnants of the merchandise, the remnants of scenes from the movie, lines, quotable, like any kind of like lasting impact on the culture, like movies that have come and gone do in spades. Like I just feel like Avatar has always been something to me where I recall when I saw it, like, yeah, I liked it. I thought the visual stuff was really, really exciting and fun for the time. To think, 13 years ago, for what it was doing, it was pretty impressive, especially what it was doing at the time, the push 3D and all that good stuff. And I say good stuff from their point of view. I'm not really a huge fan of 3D, but I mean, I just think that it's really interesting to think about the time it's taken to make the sequel. And they've already, from listening to him recently, it seems like they've already got like the third one pretty much shot and half of the fourth one shot. And it's just, it does seem like an interesting time for, we always talk about IP and what Disney's doing right now and where Disney's at as a company. And this is a movie that at the end of a year right now, where there's really little coming out for months, could have really strong legs. Oh yeah, could do the same thing that the one did 13 years ago to become the biggest movie of all time, because that movie didn't go away for like 3.5 months,
right?
And it made more money weekend over weekend than the one prior, and it was just one of those kind of juggernauts. So it always stands out to me in conversations with people that I talk to that are friends of mine that are big movie buffs, and even just people that just see the big things. Avatar never comes up in a conversation, whether it's like, what's your favorite movie, or what's like the best theatrical experience, or like top 10s or things like that. It just, it feels to me like it had a bubble in that 10-month period around it, like, in terms of Academy nomination, all that stuff. And then after that, it just went away. It just disappeared. And there's been this discussion over it over 13 years about 5, 6, 7 movies coming out.
Right.
And now here we are. We finally have one coming out. And I sit back and say, okay, I haven't watched it in 13 years. The biggest movie of all time. So yeah, let's all watch it together. That was the idea. But
by one of the big directors whose work regularly gets dragged out and re-talked about, and like Terminator 2, for instance, or Titanic have much bigger shadows with regards to the specific references. I wonder if it's because the achievement is such a technical achievement. I mean, it is unquestionably
true,
a technical achievement, though. I mean, you watch this movie, it is unquestionably, they worked on getting that part right,
Yeah.
We've seen so much CGI since then that kind of drafts on the technology maybe developed for this movie and movies like it, but that is implemented in a much less careful way.
Right.
Much less careful way. So I think that there is something about maybe that makes it less of a conversation piece as time goes by, because you can say, oh, wow, this movie kind of blew people's minds based on how it looked, but almost nothing else about it is on that level. You know what I mean? Totally. The visuals and the design and the pacing and even the staging of some of the action scenes is just immaculate, and your eyes pop out of your head. But the characters, the story, the dialogue, it feels very predictable, very rote. And I mean, it gets by on some originality. Some aspect of it feels fresh just because it isn't one of these other franchises that we've just finished talking about how fatigued we are by them. And something about James Cameron being a guy who's trying to make a real movie and not think of his movies as product, even though he's such a funny, pompous nerd about how his stuff is so different when it's really not, but it is different in that way, in that he's trying to push the whole medium forward in some strange way when he makes a movie. So I think that might be why, is that there's not much to say beyond, oh, wow, it looked really cool. That shot was really cool. That, there's not a whole lot to the story or the characters that sticks to your ribs. Right. Conversely, with some of these other properties that have characters that people love and actors that people love that don't necessarily try to do something so technically special. I mean, we've just been recently talking about how Star Wars has largely forgotten how to try to blow your mind with what it can show you the way it used to. And the Marvel movies have always had, a range of visual effects, sometimes just serviceable to get the story told. It's not about wowing you with what they can do. And James Cameron is always trying to do that. So, and that aspect of the movie still held up. I don't know what systems you guys watched it on. I know you have a pretty nice home system, Ronald. Did you feel like Avatar, was one of those that kind of lets you show off the home theater experience?
I have a very unique version of Avatar. As a group that I deal with online that kind of upscales and remasters things, like adds HDR to stuff. And I have a 4K copy of Avatar that's like pristine. Like I gotta show you guys one day when you come over. So same audio, 5.1, great. Now, one thing I will say is there's an argument that I've always disliked about the Avatar thing, is like that it's Pocahontas meets
Ferngully.
Ferngully. When
and Dances with Wolves.
Here's my counter argument. 50% of the IP that comes out is based on something that already came out already. So like it bothers me that like that's like, sure, I mean, you can pull that from anything. Like I could say that this is based on this is a like
what's
remake.
actually original now.
You can make anything sound dumb if you want to by comparing it to something like that.
For sure. And that's always bothered me about Avatar. Now, full transparency, I literally watched Avatar like a week before you said it because I wanted to get prepared. And then I rewatched it again. And I have to tell you that Avatar is not nearly as bad as I thought it was in my head. Like when I saw it, I was like, this is an achievement, right? But then I kind of was like, why did it get lost in the zeitgeist? And I think some of it has to do with like where it was readily available. Like there are some movies that are always available everywhere. So like, if it was available on Netflix, I feel like more people would be able to say, hey, what the fuck happened to Avatar? Let me rewatch it. It's been a while. It was never on anything like that.
Right.
It was never on Hulu or anything. I never saw it on Hulu. Disney Plus picked it up, and that was like, it was very recent. Like it was within the last couple of years. So like it wasn't readily available on the streamer. So I feel like things live on through, their watchability, rewatchability. And some of that literally sometimes has to do with where it's available. And Avatar was not available. There were times during this 13 years that you speak of that I was literally trying to find it on just like a streaming thing. I know it would come on TNT, it would come on like TNT and TBS, but like streamers,
right?
It was lost. That is my shitty explanation for why it may have kind of disappeared from the conversation. Availability, right? But the movie itself is fun. It's a popcorn movie. It has a lot of cool messages about the way we treat the earth, and that stuff is kind of on the surface, but it had to be said. The fact that somebody like James Cameron was trying to say something like this 13 years ago, hey, don't fuck up the environment. Be kind to people. Don't mistreat the natives. Be kind to them. Maybe this whole thing about taking over environments and, adding something to society and giving people languages and giving people culture is bullshit. Right. The fact that he had that stance for like a $200 million movie is fucking crazy to me, or 100 million, whatever it was at the time. So overall, not a perfect movie, but it was fucking fun and beautiful. And it still gets me kind of like worked up when I think about when Jake Sully can first walk after not being able to walk, and he's like walking in an avatar body. It's something really cool.
And he just like takes off running. Yeah.
Takes off running.
Yeah, I mean, that's a cool scene.
The way Sigourney Weaver kind of mothers, it becomes his like surrogate mother, like things I totally forgot about when I first saw the movie.
Also in that bucket, I totally forgot that Giovanni Ribisi was even in this movie.
Yes, I totally
Giovanni Ribisi, our subtlest thespian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, he's always fun. I think that when it's such an odd thing, because I don't know if I disagree with anything you said, Ronald. I don't think I'm as rosy on it as you, but I kind of would want to say there's really nothing wrong with this movie. It just, and that message, it connects. It's just that, like, James Cameron, there's a secret about James Cameron. I think we've talked about this before. There's a secret about him that people don't really talk about. The dude is corny as fuck. He's corny. Like, when it's his script and his words and his screenplay, he's corny. He's not doing like the Spielberg thing of finding like a great playwright to go write a script for him or whatever. And maybe there's a reason, like maybe there's a down the middleness, there's a hit in the bullseye thing that James Cameron knows how to do that is sometimes not that exciting to me to think about or to even to watch. But it's so accomplished and it is so carefully done. And I was I mean, again, having seen all these things where I don't want to just repeat what I just said, but I really did find myself thinking, like, you know, this is the perfect time for me to rewatch this movie because we are sort of at the end of our rope with the familiarity of these sagas we've been watching, where the storytelling's not always on point. And there's one thing about these movies. I mean, and you know, I've got tickets to see Avatar: Way of Water on Sunday morning. There is a part of me that's like, I still don't know if I want 3 hours and 10 minutes of this in a theater. It sounds like it's crazy. And every review I've read has made it, and I haven't read a lot, but just like little passing references, it sounds like the same movie to me. It sounds like people are saying, technically immaculate, beautiful visuals, beautiful imagination, clunky script, obvious characters, predictable story. But I mean, it's the same people that are giving it high marks for the spectacle. And I've seen plenty of critics, you know, people always act like critics don't want to give a popcorn movie credit, but critics will say in an interview, I mean, in a review where they're talking about how predictable something is, they'll also talk about how they enjoyed every minute of it despite that, you know. So I think this is what you kind of know what to expect from this. The one thing I'm excited to see is how it might expand the world and the creatures that we see. I think the real problem for me with the Avatar movies, and it will always be a problem, and it's just something I have to get over to watch these movies, is I just don't like the design of the Na'vi. I don't like to look at them. I don't like their facial design. I don't like
their stupid faces, John.
I hate to say that.
Stupid faces.
Someone out there listening has a face like a Na'vi, and they're saying
it's based on someone, and you just attack them.
Right. But there's just something like they need to be more alien or something for me, or just have the ears and there's something goofy. And if I look at their faces too long, I can't take them too seriously. All the other creature designs I think are really cool to look at. I mean, all the monsters and wildlife, and like you said, Ronald, the way it's all connected, I think all that works for me. So I know I can get through it. Way of Water, I'm not going to be coming out of it. Likely, I'm not going to be coming out of it with hatred in my heart, but I might be tired. However, I don't know how. I mean, there's some part of me that's always going to be wowed when someone's putting that kind of imagery on the screen, and you know, like fantasy sci-fi novel cover or sci-fi calendars with paintings on every month. You know, the idea of seeing that kind of stuff brought to life has always, for me, been the appeal of what James Cameron is doing here. So yeah, I think the eye candy's going to be on point, and it was on point in this. And you're right, Ronald. It is like the sincerity and the earnestness of what it's trying to do. It does win out over my problems kind of with the corniness. It does work. It's functional. It's just that by the time it gets to the end, just to say what Steve said, I'm not thinking of a particular character moment or a line that really resonates with me. I'm thinking about different scenes and different visuals. And the version I watched was actually the extended collector's edition, which is close to 3 hours long. And I think there's more Earth stuff at the beginning of that. I felt like, having not watched the movie in forever, I appreciated the additional scenes that gave me a little bit more color and a little bit more time with the characters. But you know, I kind of watched it in shifts. I decided at a certain point, I'm going to treat this like it's 3 hours of a TV show. And so I just, and it actually worked. Like where the breaks were, I was like, you know, if Avatar had been a prestige television show, I might have enjoyed it more, because an hour and then some time to leave it and come back, it felt good. But no, I mean, you know, I think, I don't know if I learned that much new about this movie, but I did confirm some of the positives that we've been talking about, that it does still pack a wallop visually. Even like a shot of a helicarrier, like not a helicarrier, but those, whatever those ships are that have the horizontal helicopter blades on them, or the one on each side, or whatever you call those ships. There's just a shot of one of those landing on a cliffside at one point, and it's just this beautiful shot where you can feel like the air quality, and you can, I don't know, and it's just like, okay, this is what James Cameron does well. He gets off on showing us that gear, and he gets off on showing you weird alien life. And he does a great job with that stuff. So
he does.
It seems like there's like a balance in terms of like what he's done. I mean, he, you know, they always say like don't bet against him. You know, he's always like,
he'd be a fool to count him out.
Overcome the expectations, and you know, he's like, you know, his doubters have always like kind of been put to shame. But it's just like, I think if you look at his filmography, definitely some movies stand out more as having a better balance of like, the character stuff and the spectacle. Like all of his movies, really, there's a spectacle element to it. Whether it's, what they did in Titanic in terms of the sets that were built, the tanks that were built, all that stuff, or Terminator 2, what they did with Arnold, and, what they did with like, making a huge action sequel, or even Aliens. It's just like, he's always about that scope and spectacle. And it just feels like maybe Avatar is just more, it's like, goes all the way in on the spectacle and maybe leaves some other stuff more to be desired, with some of the character and story that some of his other movies actually have a really good quality with, or have good depth to. And I think that's really always been the concern with Avatar. And I think it is really probably why what I said earlier, and, we've kind of all touched on it, it's like, I think that's probably why it hasn't had the impact, on culture or the zeitgeist, whatever we're going to call it, in the years since, because I do think it has been so kind of promoted and marketed, and like what moment it had was that you had to see it in theaters. And, and kind of when that moment passed because of the visual, the spectacle element, and, yeah, you can watch in your nice home theater at home, but I don't think anybody was doing that as much, just because like it really did lean so heavily into the theatrical experience, and you need to be a part of this moment. Kind of like Endgame did, that's kind of what got it so high up there. Is like, you don't want to miss this moment in theaters. And I think with Avatar, it was really the technical achievement that it was. And you really, in most cases, only really experienced that in the theater. So, I don't think it really kind of had the impact on home video or streaming, like Ronald was saying, that a lot of other movies do. And, kind of maintain that reputation or, their relevancy in years that pass. But yeah, I mean, the rewatch for me, I kind of came out feeling the same way. I feel like remembering the first time I saw it. I mean, I enjoy the movie. I mean, I just don't find it to be anything special as a movie to me beyond it just being a good time. It looks awesome, and I'm really kind of curious to see the sequel and kind of what they're able to do to push that visual element. I do hope there's more in terms of characters and story in this one that doesn't feel as familiar, and maybe it won't because they're kind of past that point of comparison to things like Pocahontas and Ferngully and Dance with whatever you want to pick. Because I do kind of feel like it does feel like all those movies. So maybe, they're in a space where they can kind of have more of an original story and go past that comparison. I hope so.
Yeah, me too.
But I don't know. It's a really fun movie to watch. And I watched it with my daughter. And, I think, there's a lot of wow moments in this movie. And for that, you can't take anything away from it. I mean, it really did kind of push the envelope in many ways for technology at that time, and it holds up pretty well. I think it still looks really good watching it on a nice home video setup, but it still kind of sits in that spot with me where like it's a cool popcorn movie. It's fun to watch. There isn't really anything crazy bad about it at all. Like it's really not anything I would knock down, but it just sits in that weird space where it's like this is a fun popcorn movie, but it's a visual achievement. It's a spectacle, and it earned that for sure. But I'm excited to see the new one. I mean, my anticipation has grown in the past few weeks to see the sequel. I'm very curious to see how it performs. It seems like internationally, it's probably going to do kind of crazy business. Domestically, I'm more curious to see how it does because the sequel kind of has that unique thing where it's still getting like a China release, which a lot of the Marvel movies don't anymore. A lot of movies in general from Hollywood don't anymore, but it managed to secure that. So, I'm sure it's going to do crazy business over there in Asia, China specifically. And I just see how high this movie goes, see what Jim Cameron's cooking this year. But yeah, Avatar was a good watch. And I'm glad I took the time to do that. And I appreciated you guys doing the same.
So what do you guys think of the what's called the Pandora paradox, which is the famous philosophical paradox whereby I believe it's Colonel Quaritch, played by Stephen Lang, says that Pandora will, what does he say? Pandora will shit you out dead with zero warning. Isn't he warning you by saying that? And therefore, is it not true or is it true? I don't know. It's a philosophical paradox that people have been talking about for 13 years now.
13 years, yeah, wow. It's deep, John. It's deep.
What do you think, Ronald? Do you think being shit out dead with a little warning is better, or do you think you'd prefer it to be a surprise?
I think I'd want it to be a surprise, honestly. because what is that going to do for me? But
how do you
make me
prep for
scared
that?
all
Yeah.
the time. Yeah,
Yeah, if
Scared
being
all
shit
the-
out alive was an option, I'd
Oh.
take it. But what if I'm in some kind of chewed up, half digested form? I don't think I would like that either. So I don't know.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's the
Sounds
reason philosophers
awful.
have been debating it since 2009. Well, now it falls on me to set the path forward.
What do you got, John?
From one of the biggest crowd pleasing movies of all time, to one of the, I wouldn't even say reviled. I don't know if that many people know about this movie or talk about this movie. It came out in 1992, I believe. Yes, it was finished in 1989, but didn't get released until 92. That's always a great sign.
Sounds good.
This movie was called Way Ahead of Its Time, a balls-out satire on the disgraceful layers that can lurk just beneath the surface. This is the anti-Ferris Bueller and fiendishly funny. It's also been called an extremely pretentious, obnoxious horror film that unsuccessfully attempts to introduce kinky sexual elements into extravagant makeup effects. This is the body horror film Society. I've never seen this movie. I've always had it kind of on my why not list. Why have I not? It's right there.
Okay. I've never heard of this movie.
And if we actually do an episode next week, I realize this movie will be talked about on our Christmas episode. And there's just something that makes me feel really good about that. Kinky, supposedly gross, and not even, critically, it's like you heard the reactions. There's some people that think this movie is a spot on satire, and other people who think it's nigh unwatchable. So the three of us will find out together, unless one of you has already seen it. You haven't, Ronald. Steve, have you seen Society?
I've seen it. And I will forever remember the box art when I worked at the video store. It's like the blonde pulling the mask off of her face in the blue dress. It's classic. I mean, the box art, at least. I haven't seen it in forever, and I feel like I only ever watched it. Like one of the guys I worked with, we watched it one time, and I remember a big chunk of it, but I need to rewatch this.
Okay.
Well, the log line, Ronald, is a California teen's worst nightmares about his parents come true when he returns home to find a grotesque party in full swing. Right. So, yes.
Oh man.
Society.
Okay. I'm in. Cool.
We gotta find where to watch that. Is it available on stream? Where we at?
It's on Google Play. It looks like, and Vudu and YouTube, etc. And it's all for like $2, $2 or $3. So yeah, it's a highly touted catalog item.
Cool.
All right, cool. All right, great Christmas choice. Nothing like an orgy sex cult horror movie for Christmas. Merry Christmas. All right, cool. So what else have you guys watched? Is there anything you want to kind of run down here at the end of the episode to recommend or not tell people to watch TV, movies, anything, Ron? What do you got? I see some thoughts.
Saw The Woman King, Perfecto. Very good movie.
Oh, really good. That's next on my list.
Good movie. It's I'd say in the whole genre of war and tribes, it's a better movie than Black Panther. Wakanda Forever, like wholeheartedly. I stand by that statement. Yeah.
All right.
And then, I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah. And then
they should have waited for your reaction for the poster.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just like
it's a better movie than in the whole thing of the tribe warriors.
Tribe warrior movie.
Black Panther and Wakanda
Forever. And then I saw Steve Spielberg's opus,
Steve,
The Fablemans.
Your buddy Steve.
Somebody, Steve.
Your buddy,
Senior Spielbergo.
Steve Allen Spielberg. I saw his movie.
Stevie Boy.
Yeah, I saw The Fablemans too.
What'd you guys think of that? I haven't watched it yet.
Ronald?
I came in thinking that this movie was going to be some like doughy bullshit with bright-eyed kid that just wanted to be a filmmaker, and it has some gravitas. It has some fucking grit to it. Like it has some real. You think you're watching one thing, and then it's like, no. It actually is really cool, man. And there's a confrontation that happens at the end of this movie that really moved me.
Oh yes.
Oh God, man!
You're talking about literally like the final scene, almost, right? Like, yeah. Or are you talking about one before that? Because there's one that I wouldn't quite call a confrontation, but it's like a meeting that's incredible. and it's just fantastic.
Maybe the confrontation, the one that happened at the school thing.
Oh, okay, yes, all that stuff. There's several scenes that were great two-hander scenes, but
but like one after the other, these scenes kind of happened. Oh man, I know what you're talking about. Then okay, so there's like 3 scenes that happened. Like Steven Spielberg got kind of heavy-handed towards that, and he's like, "Are you gonna cry at this one? Okay, you're not gonna cry this one. You're not gonna cry this one. Okay, you have to cry at that last one.
Or feel something, whether it's crying or not. There's a
feels.
I mean, Steve, it's the last moment that almost makes the movie for me, and it's like Steven Spielberg is a visual stylist par excellence. We know that, and he has been the guy who made the movies. Like, whether you love or hate his movies, the guy breathes cinema, and you know it. And this movie, like Ronald said, you almost think you're going to get like a cuddly coming of age story, and I think it's almost people talk about him like he's cuddly, but Steven Spielberg is really not that cuddly. He just turns up whatever emotion he's doing, and so people remember maybe the saccharine moments or the sentimental moments, but there's always some heavy shit and some disturbing stuff that goes down in a Steven Spielberg movie, and this movie really gets that like. It's both the ugly and the beautiful side of like his relationship with his parents and how each one of them contributed to who he is. And I mean, if Giovanni Ribisi is our subtlest actor, certainly Michelle Williams is our subtlest actress. I mean, she's great, but she pulls some expressions in this that are definitely like, this is for the people in the very, 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 very back row of the theater. But
some stage acting for your ass, man. It's like
definitely, but very good. And I think really it allows Paul Dano to be the subtle one for the first time in a long time, compared to someone else. But it's an interesting movie. I mean, like it's not what you might be expecting if you're just picturing, Steven Spielberg's doing a coming of age movie about himself. It's not like Ronald said, this is the kid who always had a movie in his heart and this is how he found his muse. It's much more about like, what does it mean? What does it do to your life when you have a gift and a goal? And what kind of path are the people around you setting you on or keeping you from if they try to steer you towards or away from your passion, and both of his parents have a different angle on kind of his future, and he has to knit something together on his own. And I don't know if you felt, Ronald, by the time it was at the end. I mean, obviously this is Sammy Fableman. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Anyway, little kid Fableman. I sort of tricked myself into the end and thinking I was actually watching footage of young Steven Spielberg. Like, and somehow this character embodies so much of whatever it is I think about Steven Spielberg, his physicality, how he represents himself in a situation, the way he's smart, but he's not really the man of action that maybe every moment needs. He's going to think his way out of something. He's going to maybe even get his way out of a situation by bringing people together with his vision. It's a really interesting movie. And once we've seen it and we can talk about it more freely, those last moments it was super powerful to me. Like,
was not expecting to feel like this about this movie. And I think some of it is like, how can I be connected to this movie? This is about a white kid in the 50s. You know what I mean? Like, how can I? But then, when it gets into it, it really starts to feel like a universal story. And that's what makes his movie so special, man. Like, he really does create this thing where you're like, oh man, like he went through a lot of shit and he did something with that energy. Like he could have taken that energy and become like a supervillain. Or he could take this and like use this as like pieces. I mean, that really has to do with one of the interactions that he has, the pieces that he takes from his life to create these moments. Like, I guess you could be somebody that's a little more vindictive about your art, where you could be like, I hate, my mom, so I'm going to make a bitchy mom in every movie that I make. Or, or you can turn this into like, what is your truth. And there's like something about coming to that in your art that's just, it's not even explicitly said in the movie, but it's told. It's shown more than told.
Yeah, which is like
so fucking smart.
But
man.
I mean,
like,
a visual stylist like Spielberg is going to figure out a way to do that.
He's going to show you,
so that you're leaving this movie with certain scenes and images, I think, burned into my brain forever.
Yes. I mean, I looked on Wiki and there's this like image that they keep showing. It's like a very specific picture of him putting his hand up. to a projector, because like I'm not going to explain anything how it happens, but he's looking at a something that he's created for the first time. How that comes to be is super interesting, but he knows that that's going to be a thing. He knows that in the montage of his life, 20 years from now, that's going to be the thing that they're like, Indiana Jones, and it's going to be like him showing it, putting his hand up to project this in. It's just like, you piece of shit, Steven Spielberg, you know what you're doing. I love you so much, man. It's like, and then you remember why you love all the other stuff,
right? There's one moment in particular that I want to say, oh, what about this moment? And I don't think it's a spoiler, but I want to let Steve experience this moment and let it be a total surprise. But there's one moment, the mirror, Ronald.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Right. There's a mirror, Steve. Sorry, I hate to spoil.
See it, Steve. I'm gonna buy it. I don't know if I've also I kind of saw it through ways, but I think I'm gonna actually purchase this movie with my American money. Like whenever it comes out on physical, I'm gonna purchase it. Probably gonna get it digital. I never thought I'd ever say that about this movie.
That's good that it surprised you that way.
Yeah, buy the shit out of it.
Buy the shit out of it. It's probably gonna win Best Picture, right?
Ooh, it could. Yeah. It really could.
I mean, it feels like it's probably.
Unless something up against it feels heavier. You know how they always give it to the heavier
Doctor
movie.
Strange is going to beat the shit out of that movie, right?
Get the fuck out of here!
It's just because they're going to like push it. They're like pushing it, right?
It feels like it's that. We can do a little Oscar episode later, but it feels like it's like, I feel like the read is that it's Everything Everywhere All at Once. It has a lot of momentum.
Oh my god!
And don't count out. Honestly, I don't know where you fall on it, but Elvis is like crazy in terms of where its place is right now. But yeah. But I got to see the Fablemans. Probably see it in the next week or so. What else? Anybody else see anything?
Other things I will save, because pretty soon we're going to be talking about our best of the year. So certain things can just be surprises. But I did see one other that might be on that list.
I did too, and I will do the same. Was there anything else you want to mention today, guys? I don't know. We got the Society for next week.
Mm-hmm.
Find it.
We're on YouTube.
With us. We're on YouTube. TikTok. Tell them about it, Ronald.
We're on YouTube. YouTube.com/Movie Schmovie Podcast. We're on TikTok. Movie Schmovie Podcast. Movie Schmovie.
You don't stop.
Yeah, and that's it. We're getting some momentum. We're getting some feedback. We're on Twitter, so you can interact with us. Sometimes we put polls up. Thank you, everybody that voted on the Henry Cavill.
Did someone just tweet about us? I thought I heard a tweet.
It happened. You heard it.
Yeah,
I heard it.
Somebody tweeted about us
in the distance. 12 people voted in like an hour for this Henry Cavill thing, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So like it's good to get the feedback, man.
What was the Henry Cavill thing? You posted a question or something?
Yeah, so I said that Henry Cavill's announced that he's not going to be Superman. How do people feel about it? I don't care. I'm indifferent. I'm angry. I'm devastated. 8% said I don't care. 0% said I'm indifferent. 33% said I'm angry, and 58% said I'm devastated.
So what's the difference between not caring and being indifferent? Indifferent, I should say.
It's like it's the saying it. You know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about?
No, I know what you're saying. There's a person who doesn't care, and they're like, I've always wanted I don't care not to sound so harsh. Because sometimes someone says, what do you want for dinner? And you want to say, I don't care, but in a sweet way. No. And indifferent is kind of the sweet way to say, I don't care.
It's the performative version. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
You know when somebody hurts your feelings, and you're like, how do you feel? Like, I don't care.
Right.
That is, I don't care. I'm indifferent is truly like not giving a fuck about it.
Like I couldn't be bothered, right?
Yeah, I couldn't.
Yeah, I don't know this man. I'm sorry to this man.
I'm sorry, I don't know this man. Harry Carvel. Who? Soup
Carvel. Does he make the ice cream?
Yeah. What?
I wanted to add one more thing real quick.
Sure.
For listeners of the podcast, they know how big of a fan I think we all are of Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners. And it's been trending this week because it actually came to Netflix this week. And it's the number one movie on Netflix.
Oh, I can believe it.
And I see tons of people posting about it, and it makes me so happy. Sad in one part, just because it never found an audience when it came out, but
Yeah.
very happy to hear people learning about this movie, finding it, watching it. But
So strange,
it's
man.
so happy to see that it's #1 movie on Netflix. I think this
Wow.
movie is a masterpiece.
It's currently my
And,
son's favorite movie. He'll occasionally let me know what his favorite movie of all time is. And right now, currently,
Really?
Henry's favorite movie is
and
Prisoners.
and
Yeah.
I couldn't agree with Henry more. It's an all-timer for me, for sure.
I'm gonna do a
And
rewatch of that.
Yeah.
it's just a cool thing. This is
It
that
is.
thing that happens on Netflix for movies that are a decade old or whatever. Just somehow they get a license to it and they put it up, and like people are like, "Oh, this movie's amazing." And I love seeing people post about the movie, talking about Hugh, Jake, and you mentioned Paul Dano earlier with the Fablemans. It reminded me to mention it. But just a fucking phenomenal cast and a movie that is an all timer, and it's on Netflix.
Wow.
It should be in the top of your queue if you're looking at the movies there. So if you ever wanted to see it and couldn't find it, you have no reason if you have Netflix now, because it's right there in 4K. If you have that plan, it looks great. But so happy to see people talking about this movie. Prisoners
Cool.
is finally on Netflix.
Damn.
That's cool to hear that Henry loves it that much. It's just like
Yeah.
it's that kind. It's perfect.
Denny.
But yeah,
you gotta love Denny.
Denny,
Denny
man,
Villeneuve.
Denny's the man. He's batting 1,000, man.
He really is.
Movieshmovie.com is the website. Like Ronald said, hit up the social media platforms, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, especially if you want to see John's haircut today. We've teased it. I'm going to bookend it with a little carrot again. Go to youtube.com/Movie Podcast. See John's haircut. He looks phenomenal. And we'll be back next week. If you subscribe to the podcast, please leave a rating. Please leave a star, some kind of share, comment, anything like that, just to help get the word out about the show. We'd really appreciate it. We'll see you next week. As always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.